All right, and welcome to another episode of the Will Frederick podcast, where we talk about real estate, wealth building, money, and life. First, I'd like to thank our title sponsor, First Access Mortgage. They're Louisiana's first choice mortgage lender for the last 21 years. We are excited to be partnered with them. And for your first home, a vacation home, or an investment property, they're truly your home loan resource. Today, we're going to talk about an interesting topic. I have a friend of mine, Paul Sauché, and we've been friends for a long time, and we went into business together, and this is what that episode is going to be about. I'll start with, we've known each other for a long time, years before we just thought about going into business together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you were just, I don't know how far advanced you were in your real estate career, but it was around 2009, 2010. When did you buy your first investment property?
So, I started investing in 2003, but I was a full-time agent at that time because I think I started in 2008. Yeah. So, which is like right around probably the time that we started to know each other.
Yeah,
so, we went to church together, and I actually was just telling him I went to his wedding too. And this is years before we were as close as we are now. I knew your wife better.
I think she would babysit your children.
That's right. Yeah. I kind of forgot about that part. So lots of interactions here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good
so
friends.
Before I go into like what we did together, which by the way, so we started a partnership. We bought a warehouse. We started an Amazon prep center. That was more Paul's area of expertise, and then we kind of rearranged some things, and then sold it to me, then sold it back to him, then he sold it. So you're going to hear that whole story today. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Paul and how his journey of him getting into the Amazon Prep Center business. Yeah. And tell me how you got started, because when we first knew each other, that was long before you were into
Right. Yeah. So previous life, I was a landscaper. I got my horticulture license and was doing that. And then in the rainy season, or in the cold season, everything would shut down. So I learned about retail arbitrage and selling products on Amazon.
So arbitrage is a really fancy word. So explain what that is, so that really secretly I can know, but our listeners
sure. So it's just taking a product from one marketplace into another. So going from Walmart, buying it at Walmart, selling it on Amazon, buying it at TJ Maxx and selling it on Amazon. So I would do like Nikes and board games, and I really could care less about what the product was. Everything was about data. So we could actually see the data points, how fast something's selling on Amazon, how much it's selling for. So I could buy something from Walmart, like kids' pajamas for $8, but on Amazon they were selling for $24. So then I could, I would try to 3x that price. Anyways, I got started with $300 in my garage, much to my wife's chagrin after I lost $5,000 on an investment prior. So I'm following up this failure of, I just lost a bunch of money. My wife's like, here we go again, which is typical entrepreneur, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you just keep pushing and pushing. And so,
and trying to convince your wife that you're not crazy.
Right. And so the real winner here was when I sold something while I was asleep. I did Amazon FBA, so I could buy product, ship it into Amazon. It would sit there until it sold. And then when it sold, that's when I got paid. But Amazon fulfilled the item to the customer.
So FBA.
Fulfillment by Amazon.
Yeah. So you got it. You basically put the sale together, but they fulfilled it.
That's correct. Yeah. So FBA,
it's sort of like flipping. Like arbitrage 100%. Is sort of like flipping.
It's bunch of
basically flipping a product.
It is nothing but flipping products. So if you think about flipping a house, it's the same method, more or less. Just it's a bunch of tiny incremental sales. So instead of a $300,000 sale, it's a $30 sale or a $50 sale.
Yeah.
But you multiply that out by thousands.
You do it a bunch of times. And
So actually, at one point, I built up to where I had a team of 7 or 8. I had shoppers going around with my credit cards and just spending tons of money buying product, bringing it to my house. I had prep people like in bedrooms, and they were like, bagging and tagging. And during the fourth quarter, when Toys R Us was still around, I was the guy going to Toys R Us, and I'd fill up. I would literally bring an enclosed trailer and fill it with toys. And so I could, pound out a bunch of work and then take off. So the reason I got in Amazon is because there's this movement going around of like bring dads home, of like these dads that like they want to have these flexible schedules.
Yeah.
And in today's internet age, we can do that. And so that was really attractive to me compared to landscaping, where I was out, plants are dying, customers are calling. A lot of anxiety around that. With this, it was just send product in, as long as I read the data right, and then I trained other shoppers to read the data right. Now, the company went like this, right? So like I'd build up, and then all of a sudden, maybe my employees made bad buys or whatever. And so then I'd have to let everybody go, and it was all over the place. And
I want to pause and highlight something that Paul just said, because this is a really important thing. And this is part of the reason we're friends. And I think his heartbeat is he's a family man. Like, he's got family business. I know this. I should be letting you tell it. But I know this about you. And I love that that's what motivated your drive to have a business, is so that you could spend more time with your family. How old are your kids now?
So Emily's 8, Julia's 5. She's about to be 6. So 9 years ago, I said I want to be home when my kid is born, and so Emily was born December 29th, and it was right at the end of the fourth quarter, and I made the most money I ever made in my life. Which really wasn't that much at that time. And I was like, I feel like a millionaire. And I took 2 months off of work to be with my wife and my newborn kid. Awesome. And it was such a gift.
Self-imposed paternity leave, right?
That's right. That's right. Now, at the end of that, I was like, okay, now I got to get back to it. And that's the scaling. I realized at that time, if I want to continue to make money without me being present, I got to scale this thing. I got to add more bodies. I got to figure out ways to bring this thing to higher scale. So I ended up getting into wholesale, where I would buy bulk from manufacturers. Gotcha. So instead of going to retail stores, now we're buying pallets, truckloads of inventory. At that point, then you need a prep center. You need a bigger space. Either you get that space yourself, or you outsource it to somebody else already doing it. And I was also doing online coaching.
I was about to say, weren't you doing some coaching too? Because I know people are going to be hearing this, and they're going to be like, how do I do that? Do you still do that? Do you still do coaching?
I don't do the coaching anymore, mostly because I sold the company. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But for like 3 or 4 years, I had a coaching program. I worked for another guy who also did it. My thing was called FBA Insiders. If you Google it, you might find something out there. Maybe something me old on the YouTubes. But yeah, so I was doing all of that, and then so I had a lot of people where I could say, hey, send me your product. I'll prep it for you for a fee. So I started testing those waters out. I don't know if you remember, you had an old office building that I rented for like a blip of time.
Yeah. The Rent Louisiana's office.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, correct.
You were in the back
room, right? And I'm trudging product back there. And, my intention was never to bring product back there. But at any rate, I did. Yeah. So, and
you'll have to go see that office, by the way. It's completely different.
Oh,
now.
really?
Like, Emily's made it much better.
Good. So I went from there into a storage unit, and a guy from my church started working with me, and turns out he later became like my GM for Cajun Prep, and did a great job. But then we went from 500 square feet, and this is where it gets into our story, into the building. Right? It was like my business was starting to grow, where I said I either need more space and I'm going to keep it in house, or I'm going to outsource. And I was already outsourcing a little bit of it. And then I said, well, we're already doing this in-house. Right. Why don't we do it for others?
Yeah.
And if you Google Amazon Prep business, you'll actually find all sorts. There's hundreds and hundreds of, they call them third-party logistics companies. Some focus on Amazon, some do direct-to-consumer freight. It just depends on what it is. But like when you're on Facebook and you're scrolling and you're like, oh, that's a cool product, and you buy it, it's shipped from somewhere. Right. And I guarantee you it probably wasn't the person who owns that company. It more than likely came from some 3PL somewhere else.
I just love, because when I got to know you and started realizing this, I'm like, so this is how the magic happens. Like, this is what is going on. And I'm so amazed at, just the magic of capitalism. Adam Smith talks about the invisible hand that moves all this product all around, and it's for a profit motive, but it's people like Paul and many others that have kind of like made our logistics simplified as Americans and spoiled the daylights out of us in the process.
Well, it's interesting that, with Amazon FBA, they basically created this third-party system to where tons and tons of families, there are now thousands of families that are doing this, and everybody has their own flavor of how they do it and what they're selling. But basically, as long as there's demand in the market for whatever the product is, and there's certain ways you can you can lose your shirt. There's a lot of ways to lose money in this business too, where
sure, yeah.
markets change, things get saturated. It's just like any other market where what works today may not work tomorrow.
Right.
And you have to adapt. And that's really my experience with Amazon and e-commerce, but it's at such a fast clip. Things change so quickly. And at any given point, it is Amazon's sandbox. They can say, hey, here's this new fee that we're imposing on you. You have no choice but to say,
Right.
I'll stay in the game and play, or I'll get out. And I've watched a lot of people go, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting out.
Yeah.
Which everybody's got their threshold.
Yeah.
And for me, I just kept leaning more and more into it. I was like, more people get out. I'm just like, let's keep
I'm just doubling down. Yeah.
And because it's all, in my opinion, it was about the angle of how I looked at the growth of what, the suppliers we have, and then what can I bolt on to the outside. So, like as an agent, you're also an investor. And you do other things, right? That are symbiotic with what you're currently doing. So this in-house work, and we're adding third party. So the prep center, that need was more of we bought this warehouse. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if you want to jump into that.
Yeah. So that's where I was thinking, this is where like kind of I came into your story, and because like we kind of reconnected. I think you were out of town for a while, you and Kelly, and then y'all moved back to town.
We were living in Slidell. We moved up to Hammond.
Yeah. And so we were happy to have y'all back, and we kind of reached out and we're talking, and you were like, hey, I need more. Well, I needed a place to be. So I rented the back office to you. Yeah. And then you were like, hey, we're outgrowing this. I'm looking for a warehouse. Do you know of anything? And so we looked around a little bit, and then a guy that I know really well, Ed Hoover, he's kind of a locally well-known guy, does a lot of warehousing. He found out we were looking, and he's kind of acted as a mentor to me and us at different times. We went and talked. He said, hey, listen, I got a warehouse. It's up in Kentwood, which is about 30 minutes away from here. And it's really big. It's really cheap. I think y'all should buy this, And so, or I think you should buy this. And so I was actually pitching to Paul to buy this warehouse as the agent, 25,000 square feet. So
yeah. And so for somebody who's never done a deal ever to be like, I'm going to go buy this warehouse that sits on 4 acres it's really not outfitted for what we were trying to do.
Right.
I mean, to get an 18-wheeler in there, it was a sewing factory previously. So it wasn't even built for 53-foot trailers. There's a lot of challenges that, not to mention, there's a reason it was not so expensive.
Yeah, it was very cheap. It was a very good deal.
It was older. Yeah, it was.
But there was a reason for that.
Yeah. And so, like when we went in there was tons of old office spaces. Eventually all that got ripped out because we needed more space. But what was nice about it is because of the price of the building, we could take our time growing. Versus, I've talked to other business partners where they sign a lease for 30,000 square feet. Well, they're on the hook for that lease, right? Like they have to make that work. And oftentimes it's, there's a chicken or the egg situation here.
Right.
Do we get more space and then hope we grow? Do we bust at the seams and then we, our lives are
maybe can't
chaos.
Yeah.
So, but with this, it gave this nice little slow, and I think with entrepreneurship in general, any sort of buffer that you can make, that's like, I think when we bought it together, we said, okay, how long are we going to wait until we lease it? To figure something out here.
Right. Yeah.
How long I think that's the question with every commercial property is how long can you muscle that?
Yeah. And I think the way we got into it together is because you were kind of like, I don't know about this is like so crazy talk. Yeah. Like I'm trying to convince you to buy this thing that's really probably 5 times the size of what you could dream to need, and so, yeah, actually a lot more than that probably because you were going from 500 square feet.
We only used like 1,000 square feet.
Yeah. So you grew into 1,000 square feet, but you were kind of like, hey, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, but what if we bought it together and then we partnered together in the prep business? And I was
in the prep business.
Am I remembering that correctly?
So my recollection is we bought the building, no one was leasing it. Naturally.
Correct. Yeah. It was empty.
Yeah. And so then,
but didn't we want to like lease it? Cause we were like, hey, we could lease from ourselves this part of it, and then have opportunity to grow. But we'll start leasing it to other people.
The idea came to me because we weren't leasing the building and we had this note.
Yeah.
And I was like,
yeah.
Well, can I just move a business in there to at least cover the note?
Yeah, exactly.
This was before COVID.
That's right. Yeah.
There wasn't all that COVID money flying around.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I think it was like you brought some capital. I had the business knowledge.
Yeah.
And we partnered and then we made Cajun Prep.
Yeah.
And then it shot up like a rocket ship, which was totally unexpected.
Yes.
Right? It was one of these right places, right times where COVID hit in February of 2020.
Yeah. February, March, somewhere in there.
And that's when I like formed the company.
Okay.
And it was like right around that time.
Okay, gotcha. I couldn't remember the time frame exactly, but I knew it was right around or right before that.
Right. So then as it's growing, that's when it gets fun for the two of us because now the company's making money, and then and a lot of it was unexpected.
Right.
It was none of it was really planned. And I had another business partner, and he said this. He said, "Paul, there's 2 times we're going to have problems in our partnership: when there's a lot of money and when there's no money." And we ended up on the when there's a lot of money. Part of it
went from when there's no money to where there was a lot of money.
Yeah. And I think in every partnership, if it's not thought out in the sense of what is your role, what is my role, how are we going to do this? Because I think you had your investor hat on of like, I'm betting on Paul.
Right. Yeah.
And I kind of like when I bought the building, I was like, I'm betting on Will because I think he knows his stuff about real estate.
Yeah.
And there was just 2 very different ideas.
Well, and you said something. One of my favorite sayings is clarity is power.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've recognized about myself, and I think you've recognized about yourself in this, is that we're both like anti-clarity people. We're like, oh yeah, I'm sure it'll work out, and we'll just kind of do this and kind of do that, and that's how we went into the partnership, which was like, I mean, it's amazing that it didn't end up being a complete disaster.
Well, and I think that goes. I think we both pat ourselves on the back of when it got really sticky.
Yeah,
and we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we move forward as this business is growing, and now there's all this COVID money. That's what I think really kind of changed it. Is I hope everybody listening got an EIDL loan because it was the cheapest money that we would ever come across. And so I got some of that and I said, hey, why don't, I buy you out of this and you take I can't remember exactly. I think it was you take the building and I'll take.
So when we started to really make money, I think wisely realized like, man, I'm the one that's doing this, and Will's really not doing a whole lot, And I mean, I'm putting it nicely, but I mean, I understand. I put myself in your shoes during that time, and I was like, I get it, Like I just came in, bought the warehouse, and that enabled you to do this. But at this point, I'm more of the real estate guy. You're more the business guy, and it's inequitable at this point, And so it was starting to feel not very fair, and I got that, And so as through talking about it, we were in constant communication about it. We kind of came up with a plan to essentially like swap equity, and I think we worked out, and I can't really remember the numbers, but I think we worked out where like I was going to basically give you my equity in the business, and you were going to give me your equity in the warehouse.
There was a net from somewhere where I think like maybe I owed you or you owed
paid
me.
So we paid. We exchanged money too, but it was an equity swap. And we did it. We sat down with an attorney and we figured it all out, and we kind of ran. And
I'm gonna pause really quick because I don't have a lot of experience with attorneys. I do now. I have tons of experience with it, but that was one of my earliest experiences with lawyers. And for some reason, I don't know if anybody listening feels this way, but lawyers scared the crap out of me. Like just the fact of like, oh, I need a lawyer.
Like I got a lawyer up.
But that experience was so eye-opening of like, no, lawyers just help you navigate. They're there for their client typically. I think this one was mutual. Just
it was mutually.
And he did a great job, and it really opened my eyes of, oh, I need a lawyer. Now there's lawyers. I talk to lawyers all the time. Which are really they're helpful. They're expensive. I don't like to. I call them and tell them a joke, and they give me a bill for like $500.
Well, and I will shout out Brett Duncan was the lawyer, and he's a good friend of mine and a neighbor, and I've known him for many years. And I won't say every lawyer is a good lawyer. I don't know every lawyer, but I know Brett, and he's a very good one. And he's a
I felt like he
trusted
had
friend,
both interests in mind.
He's good at that.
And so we sat down. We did that equity swap. And then that lasted like what, 6 months maybe?
Yeah.
And the business kept growing.
At that point, the arrangement was I was going to be the owner of the warehouse and you were going to be my tenant.
And you were,
Our
and I was
business.
only leasing like 5,000 square feet at that time.
Which was a fifth of the warehouse. I was going to still try to rent out more of it to other people.
And this is the friendship aspect of it. I kept encroaching past that 5,000. Like, hey man, I need more space. He's like, fine, whatever.
Yeah, just go ahead. Yeah, a little bit more.
And then eventually, I think I was in half the warehouse, and we got to this point where it's like, look, I either need you to rent the whole warehouse or just buy it. And then that situation was okay. Like you're an investor. You have a certain amount of money that you're wanting to make on this,
right? Yeah.
And I'm a business owner at this point, and I'm trying to keep my rent as low as possible,
right?
Like a business owner does. And so then we came up with an agreement. I remember I called my cousin in California, and I was lamenting to him. I'm like, man, I'm at this crux, And I remember talking to my wife, like, I guess I'm going to buy the whole warehouse, because that just makes the most sense. And this is another, with my wife's chagrin, just like, what are you going to go buy this massive, what are we going to do with it if it doesn't work, if it fails, if it, not only that now, so I got
our poor wives, huh?
I know,
man,
right?
They're like good ladies, good ladies.
And I love my wife. She goes, you got 6 months. You got 6 months to get this thing off the ground. If not, awesome. Squash it. And so I ran the numbers. The numbers were good. And in reality, 25,000 square feet when I bought it back from you, and that was an odd scenario because I knew what we bought it for.
Right. It was uncomfortable because I was like, this is what I'm going to sell it to you for. And you were like, what? I know what we bought it for, and it was,
But I wasn't supposed
tense.
to know that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you did. So,
so there was a lot of, at what point is that there's this friendship business,
right? Yeah,
and I think that's why a lot of people don't want to do business with family members.
Sure, yeah, it's dangerous. You could lose a friendship, you could lose a relationship with a family member. Like it can get a little hairy.
Yeah, and I've been in scenarios like that, and it's really sad.
Yeah,
and I think that's why with partnerships now today, like learning from that experience, anytime I step into one, which I think they make sense in certain scenarios, but to just get the lawyer first.
Yeah.
Draw out that
would have been good.
Those black letters on that white paper and really figure that way when in 4 years, when there's issues or there's a lot of money or there's no money, all we got to do is refer back to this contract that we
right.
have.
Yeah.
And that's
it's black and white.
Yeah. And that clarity is super helpful.
Yeah.
So I bought the warehouse back.
Yeah.
And
well, let me chime in here because we had bought it for such a good deal in the beginning when we bought it that the deal that I sold it to you for later seemed like not as good a deal, but
a good deal.
Yeah, it was still a good deal, but it was hard to see that in the moment. But I was trying to create the win-win, because hey, I want to make money because I took a risk. Yep. However, I want to still I'm not going to really you take advantage of the situation, And I think we both got wise counsel. Like I sought out mentorship and said, hey, what's a fair price and what's this and that? And then you also did the same thing. And that's when it came about okay, yeah, you're good. So that's when I exited this whole business and I was happy. I had made money and I was really excited for Paul because he was blowing up and going big.
You sold the business, but we owner financed it.
That's right. Owner financing. Yeah.
But it was interesting because it was doubled. It was we bought it owner financed together.
Which it was complicated because we bought it together owner financed. Then he basically gave it over to me, and I took over the owner finance note, and then we sold it to. I sold it to him, and I was owner financing it to him and from this guy. So I was just kind of like the go-between guy.
And so you fast forward 2-3 years, I sold the business to somebody else that I now work for today. And I sold it for more than what I bought it from you for.
Yes.
So at that closing, I made money, you made money, and then, down at the bottom, Ed made money.
Ed Hoover made money. Yeah. So it's a daisy chain, and everybody won.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. But what's funny about that is when I would tell people about this double owner finance, they're like, wait a second.
Wait, can you do that?
Yeah. I was like, I guess I don't think there's anything, I'm not the real estate guy. I was like, but it worked. And so, today what's crazy is, I sold my Amazon business and, Cajun Prep, the prep center to, a private firm in New Orleans. And I got recruited. What I didn't realize is what I was learning over the last 7-8 years. of everything, all this like eating, sleeping, and drinking, e-commerce and Amazon, and just learning about that constantly. Little tidbit about me: I was expelled from high school. I got a general studies degree in college. I was not like the bookworm, and today,
that's a beautiful story, dude. I mean, like,
well, but what was funny, and I've never filled out a resume in my life, and so today I'm the VP of e-commerce for this other company, helping sell these CPG brands, and still operating Cajun Prep and my Amazon sales business.
And by the way, the VP of the company, I've never seen him look any different than he looks right now. Backwards hat, t-shirt, shorts, sandal,
today I have to go to board meetings and they at least get some slacks and a polo.
Okay. All right. Well, I've just never seen that.
That's right. No. Well, it's so funny. The idea of like having to the stress for success or whatever. I mean, I'm mostly making all of my money in my bedroom. Like, I just pound on, or a coffee shop. I'm like half and half.
Yeah.
And it works, and especially even like the working from home idea or like the generation how we were raised was dad goes to work, he comes home later, and versus like we're just together all the time in our home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which has its whole set of challenges.
Yeah, it's got challenges. You have to sometimes focus and say, "No, baby, I can't read or play dolls right now."
I used to make a rule where if daddy's headphones are on, he's working.
Yeah.
Don't talk to daddy. But and we made it work. So I got to a point in my career where I was like, I'm ready to cash in. But what was funny is I never really built to sell.
Yeah.
So my acquisition was really a talent acquisition, which I never even heard the term. It was, they really wanted my knowledge.
Yeah, they wanted you. They wanted the person.
Right. Yeah. Versus, I mean, the companies had, there was equity, there was, like once you got down to EBITDA, there's stuff there. But and the companies were thriving at the time of selling. So I sold I was really excited to have the real estate as a piece of that sale.
Yeah.
And so now again, still managing all of that.
Yeah. Because even so, like with all of us making money, I think it was still sold probably at a very good deal compared to what they're used to seeing warehouses, prices for,
Absolutely.
I mean,
any major city,
yeah,
absolutely.
So, I mean, I think, so I loved that prospect of having Paul on because I wanted to share this story. It's a really cool story. And we've told it at, we get together with some investors and talk, and we've told parts of it, and it's just like, what? Like, I mean, not that you could make a movie out of it, but like for me and for us, I think we feel like it was very fun. We learned a lot. It was crazy. It was some ups and downs and like Wild West type of stuff.
Well, and any time, I don't know, whenever you've had a loss, anytime I've had a loss, I just go, man, I just paid for some education.
Yeah.
And I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in education over the years to where my old theory is I just need to win a little more than I lose.
Yeah.
So on Amazon, I'm going to send in 100 products. I'm going to sell 50% at a profit that I really want to be at. I'm going to sell 20% at, okay. And then there's going to be this portion, 10%, 15%. They're going to end up in the trash.
Yeah. Lose money or whatever.
It's going to happen. Yeah. But am I analyzing those experiences?
Yeah. You have to take education. I mean, John Maxwell, he has a book, I think it's called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn.
Yeah.
And so you have to take those experiences and learn from them. And I think our friendship, which I value hugely, I would even call it co-mentorship. We kind of helped each other grow up through that situation and say, hey, how can we use this? And we've maintained a great mutually beneficial relationship and friendship long after that, what could have been a very bad situation. So
yeah, and for the partnerships where you talk to somebody and they had one go south and they're like, I'll never do a partnership ever again, and it's like,
I've said that before.
Yeah, well, but I think it's
not because of our partnership, before our partnership, but
it does get sticky. And I think whenever you're again going back to the clarity, if you can just in business in general, you need clarity. You got to give that to your employees. They need to know what their roles are. Like I've had situations with employees where they're like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing or what I'm responsible for or not, and it's like the fear to get really clear. I'm not really sure where that comes from. of like, okay, well now I'm like confined.
But you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or you want to make them uncomfortable, and that's what it is for me.
Yeah, yeah, and but I think there's a practice there.
Yeah.
Of the more I
muscle.
engage with those kinds of conversations, the easier they get. You know, like for example, the first time I had to step into a board meeting, and I'm with all these guys that are way smarter than me. Most of them could be my dad or my grandpa. You know, and I'm in here, this young kid, like telling them about the internet and how we're making more money on it, and it was uncomfortable. And I had a mentor of mine, and it was Chick, and he goes,
okay,
Chick Miller,
Yeah.
and he said, Paul, there's some situations in life you're just not supposed to be comfortable in them.
Yeah.
Just embrace that awkwardness.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's good.
Versus trying to get through life without having any uncomfortability.
Yeah.
But my experience with that is, man, when I like embraced that and leaned into it.
Yeah.
Now I can talk to presidents of this company or that company, or
get comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's it.
So.
Yeah. So embracing that uncomfortability, and I think the experience that you and I had was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was so unplanned, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the
which is like us.
Yeah, that's the nature. Like my whole idea with business is I'm just going to like lift over as many rocks as possible. And I think what separates people that can be successful in business are the ones that are so tenacious. They're like, I am going to figure this out.
Yeah.
Within reason, right? I've met other people who are like, I hate my job, I'm quitting, I'm going to go be my own boss. And it's like, that's not very wise to,
You got to have a little bit of a plan, and I think you have to be able to take a little bit of risk, or a lot of risk. I mean, you and I have both used this term many times before. We've built the parachute while we're flying down. We jumped out the plane and we're like, okay, we got to figure this out, because if we don't, this could be really bad.
Yeah.
So, and we did that. This was a great example of that.
Yeah. And it's super exciting. I think there's, like Cajun prep, it's not the sexiest business. I mean, we're literally just packing boxes. Like it is grueling, just like you're receiving, you're breaking it apart, you're putting it back together, and you're putting it out the door.
Right.
But that experience, I'm not sure where I was going with that.
Well, it's you can make money doing, if you're adding value, you can make money doing whatever, but you have to just make it productive.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. So
well,
it was fun, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm very appreciative for our friendship and our history together. This was a fun story to tell to our listeners today. And so I thank y'all today for listening to the Will Frederick podcast, where we talk about real estate, wealth building, money, and life. See you next time.